Keith Weed, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at Unilever, said, "Leading brands and agencies have known for many years that more creative work delivers better results than safe and rational advertising. What has been exciting in more recent times is to see the emerging proof of this, the hard evidence that creative work is more memorable, more effective, and more able to drive overall business performance." Hi, I'm your host, Conor Byrne, and welcome back to That's What I Call Marketing, the podcast where you will hear from the leading lights in the marketing world and listen to their unique stories. That quote from Keith Weed was actually about my guest today. And today I'm joined by James Hurman, author of The Case for Creativity, The Creative Effectiveness Code, and his new book, Future Demand. James is an award-winning planning director, and in 2013, he was named the world's #1 strategic planner. In 2014, James founded Previously Unavailable, chasing his passion for helping innovative companies use insightful strategic thinking to create products and brands that become sustainably successful. He chose the name Previously Unavailable simply because he loves bringing new things into the world. Today, we talk about the importance of asking really interesting questions to get to a great springboard for creative teams, but also how digging into insights can help create new brands and products, like the New Zealand brand of bread that was too big for your toaster, called Mackenzie High Country Bread, and all the ways that came to life in the market. We dig into understanding and sensing the timing as it relates to cultural moments, grappling with AI tools and leaning into the natural disposition and exposure those younger than us have to them. We dig deep into the case for creativity and why award-winning work actually matters, and the importance for startups, VCs, and boards to think about brand building to create future demand. And we talk about so much more. So let's get right into it. James, thanks for joining me on That's What I Call Marketing. I can't not say this is take two because we had technical difficulties already. So I thought this internet thing was going to take off.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you a second time, Connor.
Well, look, we got cut off at the point where I was asking you about your path. First of all, that you were named in 2013 as the world's #1 planning director, but it didn't kind of start that way. You were in IT, and am I right that were you working in an agency or doing work in an agency, and you're like, this looks like fun?
Yeah, so I did start as an IT guy. So I was the person who, back in the late 90s, would install, your antivirus updates and crawl around underneath your desk, unplugging Ethernet cables and that sort of stuff, which was, don't get me wrong, was amazing, but just not quite as awesome as planning advertising. So yeah, I worked in a big agency in London, Grey. And I did a really short contract there for 3 months. That was my first taste of the advertising world. And then when I returned to New Zealand, I got a job in an ad agency here, and that was when I really kind of discovered that what they were doing was a lot more interesting than what I was doing, and that I perhaps could have made better vocational choices earlier on in my career.
But actually, it is interesting because when I meet people for this podcast, I find that people have kind of almost like they fall into two categories. One is, when I was 6, I remember seeing this ad on TV and I knew that's what I wanted to be. And then there's others like you and me that, kind of fall into it a little bit. Did someone take a kind of a chance on you to give you that opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a few chances were kind of taken on me in those early days. So certainly there were people working in the creative department of the agency that I was the IT guy in, who became really good friends of mine and who kind of just, were generous enough to kind of invite me into their process in various ways, which was weird to do with an IT person, right? And then one of the partners at the agency, I think also just sort of, I don't know, was bemused, but kind of thought that maybe, maybe I could would be okay to sort of have a go at the on the tools. And so, yeah, there was one of the partners there who was really supportive and kind of stuck up for me a bit, which was amazing. And then, yeah, the first person that gave me a job as a planner, which was the head of another agency. Again, kind of, really took a chance because I hadn't really no prior experience or sort of skills or probably talent at that point either. So that was good too. So yeah, I mean, definitely I'm the product of lots of people kind of being kind enough to sort of let me have a go at doing what I ended up loving doing for most of my life.
But you were obviously then, and I wouldn't know, but like, I guess you were really curious. There must have been some, like, just a sense of curiosity that they picked up from you, because, they weren't just going, look, you're having your tea, come and join us, you look bored.
Yeah. That's definitely true. And I mean, I think that's kind of that's something which is generally true of very good planners, is that they are very curious. And I think, it is almost the art of sort of harnessing your curiosity. I think planning is about, obviously it's about being curious about human nature, and about how people relate to brands. But also I think, I found a lot of joy in, we talk about advertising being, in large part about storytelling. And I always thought that I was most happy as a planner when I was kind of story finding, which was kind of going into a brand or a project or whatever, and trying to find, like, sniff out where's the most interesting story here, right? And kind of asking questions and trying to ask really interesting questions to find where there was something that was, just really interesting or unique or unusual in a really positive way that could be a springboard for the creative people to work from and do something really interesting from. So I think, that curiosity, that sort of, I don't know, that innate enjoyment of going into a situation and sort of ferreting around and trying to find what is the kind of interesting bit strategically is very much what I enjoy.
It's almost like those, like, reminds me of, like, not a kid's book, but like, that kind of detective type books. Remember the ones they used to get? It was like, go here for page 7 for this to happen, the story, page 6 for that. And it was kind of, but it's almost like that. It's like, where will I go and where's it going to take me that I'm going to find this interesting? Was there like an aha moment or project that you worked on in those early years that you were like, it's coming together. Like, this is phenomenal. I'm good at this. The work is good because of my work. Was there any moment that you look back on? And
probably the first really, I don't know, like really formative thing I think that I was involved with as a wee baby planner at the first agency where I worked in the planning department. It was a project for a company here in New Zealand called Goodman Fielder, they make like bread and milk and grocery staples like that, and they wanted to create a new brand for the packaged bread aisle here in New Zealand. And so it was really interesting because it was a brand creation and sort of product creation job as much as it was an advertising job. So it was the first time that I got to be involved with sort of creating something to be advertised and then creating the advertising. And I think, like, where my, I guess where I think I've always seen the role of strategy and insight and creativity, is sure that applies to advertising, but can it apply more deeply than that to the actual product or the actual experience? And so we set out to create this. I'll tell you the whole story because it actually is really quite a cool story. So we were in the agency, and and we had this meeting one morning with the client, and they brought in their chief baker, who was this kind of big burly man from the South Island who baked all the bread, and he'd brought some test products in. So
Okay.
they'd just been baking they'd been like mucking around doing some prototypes of some interesting sorts of bread. And so he had like a bread that had like cranberries in it, and a bread that had walnuts, and some kind of banana bread thing, and sort of all of these interesting breads, right, for us to try and just sort of, jam around on. And then lastly, he pulled out this really big kind of loaf of white bread. So if you imagine a loaf that's like maybe 1.5 times as wide as a normal loaf,
Okay.
and this big loaf, and he plonks it down on the table, and he sort of proudly says, "It's so big it won't fit in your toaster." And and he had a name for it. He called it Hungry Man bread, and it was kind of like it was almost a joke, like. But I think in the agency we kind of, me and my boss, I think, kind of went, there's something really interesting about bread that's too big to fit in your toaster. There's something about like a generosity of that, which is kind of, which maybe, makes you feel like that's what loaves of bread would have been before the modern age, when we made them kind of small enough to fit in a toaster and and small enough to fit on a big corporate P&L, and so we kind of like, so we started this project because my boss, he ran the agency, but he also worked he had a sheep station down on the South Island of New Zealand that he went back to for the weekends, and so he was like, that sheep station was in a part of New Zealand called Mackenzie Country. And he was like, it feels like it's from, it's the bread that the farmers would have eaten in Mackenzie Country in the 1800s. And so anyway, then, so we were kind of jamming on that, and the bread ended up being called Mackenzie, Mackenzie High Country bread. And it was, too wide to fit in your toaster. It was a big loaf. And it was, all of the stories started to come together when I was reading the diaries of a woman called Lady Barker, who had moved to New Zealand in the early 1800s from Britain. And she was she was like the mum on the sheep station. So she worked on the sheep station, looked after all of like the farmers, and the shepherds, and all of the people on the farm, and she would bake for them and serve them their lunch and all that kind of stuff. And she wrote all these diaries about her life. And there was a baker down the road, and they made this 4-pound loaf, which was this giant loaf of bread. And she sort of, just in reading those books, I kind of built up this really rich picture of this time and this place, and the role of food and sort of essential food like bread within that world. And so we crafted this whole brand, which really was this whole kind of, this idea of Mackenzie Country and the kind of 1800s. And we wrapped the bread in brown paper, so it wasn't in plastic. And that was that was kind of a major packaging innovation, really, in 2003 or whenever this was. And it was this beautiful thing that really kind of, it was a proper new brand that had kind of like a point of view, and it had a differentiated product. And then we did like beautiful advertising. So we'd do newspaper inserts that were on brown paper rather than newspaper. And we'd tell the story of kind of the Mackenzie High Country in the 1800s and the things that happened on the sheep station. And it was really amazing. And it was one of the most successful new product launches ever in New Zealand at that point in the supermarkets, and like really took people's imaginations. And so that was, I guess, my kind of the first one where I sort of, learnt my craft a little bit, and also just learnt the value of applying that craft to the advertising, but also trying to apply it to things that are deeper than that, which is what I tend to do more of today rather than the advertising side of things.
Yeah, that's incredible, bringing something to life like that. And you can, and it's what's really interesting there is actually, as you're telling that story, I could almost see how it could go in one of, or many directions, but one is that, like, the heritage, around why it makes sense, but also, there could be another one that's kind of pushing into, we need bigger toasters, right? Like, and have fun with it. But it's just really interesting that, and you can see why but the heritage really, people are drawn to that, right? Because then, and again, it depends what's going on in the world at that moment, right? At certain moments in time, people really need that in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was the right time for it. And I don't know what would happen if you made it and released it today, whether it would be as successful, but it's certainly, it is a lot about, I mean, that's another thing about planning, I think, and about creativity is like sort of being able to sense when the time is right for something, because ideas do have their time. And, I think good creative people have a really good sort of sense of, this feels like the right time for this idea. And so, I think that's part of sort of the art and the magic of what we do.
Yeah, and it is that, isn't it? It is that art, because everyone does want there to be science, and we get onto a bit of that, right? Because there's lots to talk about there. But I mean, there is art to it. There is gut feel to it. There is being close to what's going on. And I, from working with some amazing creative people that I've worked with, they're so connected to just so many different things that are happening in the world, right? I think about someone like Doug Cameron in DCX in New York. Well, he's a planner, but he's very creative, and like, he's just connected. He just knows. He just has this kind of amazing ability to absorb so much of what's going on, and then kind of tap into it deeper, right? When he thinks something's happening, right? The kind of the cultural strategy piece.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like super fascinating, I think, how you kind of, tie things into culture in the right way, or, either sort of, be a creator of culture and that you put, into the world some sort of intervention that actually leads culture, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Or just kind of, being relevant to what's going on, and being brands being a relevant and positive and constructive participant in culture, I think, is kind of equally valuable. And so, but sort of understanding, having your head around what the culture actually is, and what's going on in it, and what the vibe is, and being able to understand the nuances. And I think often, like, I find myself now, I'm 45 now, so I'm not super old or anything, but I do definitely see that there are people who I work with who are younger than me who have a much better innate understanding of what's going on out there in the world. I think I think most people do lose that a little bit as they get older.
Yeah.
Some people are really able to kind of keep hold of it, which I really admire. But I think generally speaking, like, when you're a bit younger, you are a bit more just attuned to kind of the vibe of what's going on.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting as well. That, like, being surrounded by people of different generations that can pull you in different directions is really, really important. Because it's not all. We certainly don't all have it right, and people of a younger generation don't, but they're seeing things differently. And what is their worldview? Because kids nowadays. I just said, but just their ability to use technology, like, you know what I mean? I mean, I struggle with some of the simple technology. Now, I don't invest enough time in it, but I'm kind of like going, I can't use your PlayStation. But it's totally. Just being surrounded by that, and you kind of just see the world from that perspective, and then equally important is the perspective of people who struggle even more so than I do with the technology, and want to throw their phone out the window, thinking of my dad.
Yeah. I mean, like, just this week, the 20-somethings in our company have been playing around with all of the AI tools that have kind of obviously emerged really rapidly over the last few weeks. And it's really interesting because they can, their aptitude for quickly learning new technologies is much higher because they've just been born with all of this, right? In the way that we weren't. So that's really cool. But also their sense of kind of what's cool and what's not, and how to use those technologies in ways that aren't, culturally or ethically sort of questionable. I think there's a real strong sort of sense of that. And so, definitely in our little world, in our company, like, I'm increasingly kind of following their lead on stuff like that, and trying to provide some sort of strategic framework around all of that makes it that makes it really kind of commercially strong. But definitely those more, those choices that are more kind of creative or gut or kind of nuanced or whatever. Like increasingly, it's kind of, I think we need to kind of learn from the young.
Absolutely. I want to talk about. I touched there about kind of art and science. And was it 2011 you released The Case for Creativity?
Yep.
And that was based on a lot of the IPA data. It was it like probably controversial, or just certainly new ideas in there at the time? What kind of drove you to put that together and write that?
It actually wasn't based on any IPA data until really the end of the writing process. And so what was amazing is that I was doing a lot of that research at the same time as Peter Field was doing his study with the IPA, the link between creativity and effectiveness. And so we sort of came together at the end and sort of found each other, and and the work they had done was amazing, obviously, and so that made it into the book in a big way. But it was almost like a really great cherry on the top at the end of the process. But the reason that I wrote the book, so when I became head of planning at Colenso in 2007, and I was the first head of planning the agency had ever had. So they'd been going since 1969. We're a fantastic agency. Had planners in the agency, but for one reason or another, had just never had a head of planning. So I was the first one, and so I got the sort of the privilege, I guess, of thinking about what should planning in this place be? What's the role of it, and what are we here to do, and how are we going to do that in the best way? And so, my sort of early thinking was, I think fundamentally planning, the role of it is to help ensure that the work is as effective as it can possibly be, right. Advertising can be made without planners, right? And that's one thing that one of the first books I read was John Steele's book, Truth, Lies, and Advertising, and in that he makes the very good point that advertising doesn't need planners. We're kind of like we're either like really helpful in the process or we're just in the way, and I think it's really good to approach planning with that humility of that we're not actually really required. And so therefore you think, okay, well, how am I going to make a contribution which is going to justify me being, another voice around this table? And how am I going to do the things that are going to help make the creative work even more effective than it would be if I and my team weren't here? And so then you start to think about, well, what is effectiveness and what are the constituent factors of effectiveness, and kind of, how do you make the work more effective? And Colenso had always been a very creatively, driven agency. And so they really believed in the work, and they really believed in the power of creativity, and that creativity was a force for, commercial effectiveness. And so I was kind of like, okay, that's great. They believe that. I need to know then, as a planner, like, is that right? Should we as a planning department working to make the work more effective, should we be driving towards sort of creative award-winning style advertising? Or should we be sort of leaving that to the creative people and really just focusing more on the sort of fundamentals of the strategy and not worrying about whether it leads to particularly creative work or not? Yeah. So it started with a real question, which was kind of like, for me was quite a fundamental one about what I was doing, but also for our client community, and we were at that point, we were a classic agency in that we had a couple of really creative clients that kind of really got it, and a bunch of clients who were like, we're a bit skeptical about all of these awards in your reception area, and you seem to spend a lot of time trying to win awards, and you seem to have a bit more energy for that than you do for some of the the sort of day-to-day stuff on our business. Yeah. And so some of them were skeptical, and some of them were very, very skeptical, like really didn't believe that doing creative award-winning work was at all in keeping with doing the right thing for their brands and their business. And so it was sort of all of that made me kind of think, well, can we find out whether whether creativity is effective. Like, is there a way of solving this problem? And so I started actually by doing a study where I compared agencies who'd won lots of creative awards with agencies that hadn't, and compared their effectiveness award-winning performance. And found that the agencies that were more creative tended to win many more effectiveness awards than agencies who were less creative. I also did a study of Cannes Lions Marketer of the Year or Creative Marketer of the Year companies from 1999 through to, at that point, 2011, and we've updated it since. But looked at the stock market performance of the world's most creative advertisers, and it was always really high around, their
Right.
stock market performance was much better than their historical average or the S&P 500 in the periods that they were creating all of that very creative advertising. So I had a couple of interesting data points there to kind of work from. And then I just went out and looked in all of the journals and for all of the academic research and into creativity and effectiveness, of which there was quite a bit, but it
Right.
was really hidden away in journals that, frankly, nobody reads. And so I kind of dug out all of that and looked at what all of that said. And what was the amazing thing really was that in doing that, I genuinely went in not knowing whether I was going to find that creative work was more effective, as effective, less effective than less creative work. I was very open-minded about it. I wasn't going and trying to prove that creativity was more effective.
Really? You no hypothesis that like this should ideally this lands this way.
Kind of, we didn't know. Like, no one knew back then. Like, honestly, it was like really no one knew. Like, you had creative people who were wonderfully eloquent sort of advocates of creativity, who could talk to you about the power of creativity in a way that made you fall in love with it. And then there were lots of dissenting voices on the other side. There were lots of senior marketing people who said, we've done this, we did this campaign that was very creative and it did nothing for our business. And we did this one that, the creatives didn't like, but it was the grand Effie winner. And, and we'd have this kind of, the industry just had this debate on an anecdotal basis, here's a creative campaign that didn't work. Well, here's one that did, and back and forth like that. And no one had really taken a helicopter view. If we look at all of the data, I mean, literally no one had. So I really didn't know what I was going to find. And if I'd found that creative work was less effective, I'm not sure I would have written a book about that, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know whether I would have written a book. I mean, the fascinating thing was that looking at it all, and I really did go to the ends of the earth to find every piece of research that had ever been done into the subject. And honestly, every single one showed not just a small, but a very large difference in effectiveness of campaigns with creative award-winning quality. So original, engaging, well-crafted, the types of campaigns that win creative awards are vastly more likely to be very effective than campaigns that don't have those qualities. And so that was amazing, because I think, there were enough dissenting voices for, if creativity isn't that effective, for there at least to have been one study somewhere that reached that conclusion, and none have at all. And so at the end of all of that, then Peter did his wonderful study 11 times as efficient as non-award-winning work, and that was really just capped it all off. And it was like, well, that's the book done. I mean, it's an open and shut case as far as I'm concerned. We should absolutely, as a planning department, be seeking to provide the sorts of briefs or kind of platforms that creatives can do great work from. And so that became really the focus of planning at Colenso was, not just how are we going to get the strategy right, how are we going to get it right in a way that it is an amazing platform for doing brilliant creative work. And so that became the focus.
It must have been a very energizing thing, particularly not obviously in the industry, but in that agency. Right, here you are as somebody who was digging deep into all this research, and then you're coming back with, I guess, the good news and saying, no, this is. And so what we're like, that point, we are going to try now even harder to give you, our creative team, even more opportunities to do amazing work. Like, that's exciting.
Yeah. It was super exciting. I mean, it was exciting in a number of ways. So yes, I mean, I think that forming a really healthy, positive, kind of warm, loving friendship between the planning department and the creative department, I think is really super critical. And by the way, not just planning and creative. Obviously, the production departments and the account service departments all need to have a great relationship with one another. But I think often there can be a little bit of a disconnect between strategy and creative. And so I was always like, we've got to be like, my view was the creative department is our customer, right? The client is the customer of the agency, no doubt, but the creative people are the people who need to take and consume what we as planning produce, right? So they're our customer.
Yeah.
So we need to be super customer focused, right? We need to understand them. We need to be all about them. We need to kind of be doing stuff that when they consume, they go, I love this. That's what being customer focused is. And so, and so it really kind of was all about that. But the other effect, which was a really cool one, one thing that I learned in my career definitely was that if you've got clients coming into the agency who they don't really want the same sort of work that you do, that you want to produce for them, if you get them into a big creative presentation and you sell your heart out on this like amazing piece of creative work that's they don't really want, it's almost impossible, right? It's really hard. And we have these silly stories of Saatchi's in London in the 80s and the suits could sell anything to anyone and all that kind of jazz. But like, actually, do you know what? I don't really buy that. Like if a client really doesn't want what you've got to sell, like it's just really hard. So what part of my job became was like going around the clients and sort of showing them all of this evidence and this research and getting them to buy into the idea that, if we do really creative work, we're going to be much more effective. So then they would come into the agency and in the brief, they would be asking for the kind of work that we wanted to produce for them. Right. So they were saying, we want a campaign that's going to win a gold lion. We want a campaign that's going to be really creative. We're with you that we need to be doing really creative work. Then when you come to the creative presentation, it's so easy because they're looking for the same thing that you're looking for. And so selling the work becomes, that's a far better way of selling the work is getting them to ask for it in the first place than trying to change their minds in a 1 hour creative presentation, which is just super hard.
Yeah. Because the degrees of disappointment happen in those moments, right? It's just like, one's happy. And that's really interesting. And it's in like, you do talk about the awards and there is definitely still. So I was going to actually, because there still is, I think, some cynicism about awards, right? The actual awards, right? And so how do you kind of address that when people are saying, well, they're awards. You'll just love your awards.
Yeah. I think there are, I think awards, firstly, I would say the awards have a very important place in the advertising and marketing industry. And I say that because they do a couple of things. One, they surface for us all of what great looks like, right? So we as a marketing and advertising community can go on to, the Cannes Lions Love the Work website and we can select, I just want to see Grand Prix from the last 5 years, and we can see what the best work in the world looks like. And that's actually very, very helpful as a community to be able to benchmark against the best rather than, if there were no awards, we wouldn't be able to do that. It would be very hard to ferret out or agree on sort of what was, what best in class looked like. And so I think they fulfill that important role. I think they also fulfill the important role of giving us a sense of what will be effective in future. So at Creative Awards, they're almost like innovation and advertising awards, really. So they're looking for where have we taken a step forward? Where have we found a new technique to engage consumers that might be quite, at this point in time, might actually be quite, almost too novel to be super effective, but in like next year and the year after, that technique will probably mature into something that's kind of super, effective and mainstream. So I think they give us a way of constantly moving forward and challenging ourselves to engage consumers in new and better ways continually. And I think if we just had effectiveness awards, for example, I think we'd stay the same. We'd just kind of be doing, what was effective this year. We'd do that again, and that would be effective next year, and we'd do that again. And gradually, we wouldn't actually get any different or better. We'd just do the same things over and over again. So I think creative awards fulfill two really important roles in the industry, above and beyond all of the stuff that they do for creative people. So they do help with creative people's careers. They are nice to win. It is fun to go to the party and all of that kind of stuff. But I think, the criticisms of all of that stuff and the skepticism around it, I kind of think those things are actually like a pretty small price to pay for those positive benefits of awards. Now, the other thing that I would say is I do agree there are too many creative awards in the world. There are so many creative awards programs, and they're just everywhere all the time. And, you can totally understand how people in other industries look at it and go, why are you just constantly awarding yourselves? I think it would be frankly, I think it would be really healthy to have Cannes Lions each year, and then to have just a local creative award show in whatever your country is, whatever your market is. I think that combination would do those important jobs of continually moving us forward and surfacing what is the best. I don't think we need 100 different global creative award programs. That's probably a little bit silly, but I do think they fulfill a really important purpose, and we shouldn't have none of them.
On that point about creatives, I often creative folk are often a striker, football. They're, when they're scoring goals, right? And so that actually the awarding and it's confidence, it gives them confidence in their ability, because that's it's a hard job. Being creative is very, very difficult. So I think, it definitely serves that purpose. But so we're still having the discussion though about the effectiveness of creativity. That's still it's still a topic for debate. Why?
There's kind of there's the rational sort of data, there's all the evidence in the world to support this. And then there's kind of an irrational side where, if you just fundamentally don't kind of understand creativity, it's very hard to kind of believe that it can be true, that it's a really effective thing to do. I think some people have very strong belief systems which are about things other than creativity and marketing, despite all of the mountains of evidence that creativity is the biggest lever that we have in marketing as marketers. And what else do I think? Why it's still a debate? I mean, I still think there are people that kind of it's beneficial to take pot shots at creativity a little bit. So, the research organizations that do creative testing, it's kind of it's in their interest commercially to have marketers feel like, we shouldn't just trust the agency. We should pay for testing research to just kind of make sure that we're doing the right thing. And so I think sometimes discontent is sort of sown by those companies when it's very much in their commercial interests to do so. And
so do you think there's no place for that creative testing, but do you think it's wasteful?
I think predominantly, yes, it's ridiculous and destructive. I think there is a scale that ranges from the absurd to the pretty good, frankly. So I think if you're reading a script to a group of people and asking them whether they like that script and it would make them buy a product, that's just crazy. There's absolutely no way that there's anything. If there's anything effective in that, besides maybe finding out if something's so absurdly offensive that you shouldn't do it, maybe. And so to the pretty good. So I will, I do have a go at System 1 from time to time, but they do actually do the best version of creative testing, where they're not asking people's opinions, they're actually observing, they have their face trace system where they actually observe the kind of expressions on people's face, which are a truer kind of proxy for how they're really feeling than asking them to explain their feelings. And so that's actually, the sort of the best, the gold standard. I think most other things are really quite ropey. And I go back to Peter and Les's evidence in their 2007 work called Marketing in the Era of Accountability, and they looked at pre-tested campaigns versus non-pre-tested campaigns, and the non-pre-tested campaigns were far and away more effective commercially. So what they're really showing there is when we use our intuition, and when we follow our own gut or our own beliefs about whether a piece of work is good as marketers and agencies, that's a better indication than, in brackets, most pre-testing. And so I think that was really powerful, because like the alignment of pre-testing metrics, like whether you get a green in a link test and what actually happens out there in the real world when the work runs, and whether people, whether it grows the brand and all, sometimes those things can be completely divorced from one another. And I think we end up kind of, I've seen so many marketing departments who the marketer's job is to get a green on link. It's not really to sell stuff. It's not really to make work that shifts the business or anything like that. It all becomes, it's just we're just here to try and get a green on a link test. That's all our job is. And so we do things which link tests like, not that people like.
because people react differently and behave differently to any thing we think they will, behave. Like we've done some amazing work with through the years with Curious Industry, and brilliant group. And yet in those groups, and even Meldrum would say it when we're working, is like, that's what they're saying, right? So it's a pinch of salt. And so with advertising and creativity, people, I think this, but then they'll behave differently in the real world when it's out there. So there's certainly a pinch of salt to all of it. And
totally.
God.
Yeah, one of the things that I find super interesting is I think our perception of things like brands or bits of creativity or whatever is actually a composite of what we like purely think of something and what we think others think of it. And so when I think that our relationship with a brand is partially, do we like that brand, and partially, do we think everyone else like us likes that brand and understands it and gets it. And so I would say that those, a brand like Heineken, for example, I think did an amazing marketing job over the past 20 years of making sure that the whole world understands and kind of gets what Heineken is and sees it as a bit more premium and sees it as very high quality and sees it as a little bit cool and all that kind of stuff. And so that, when you're standing in a bar and you order a Heineken, you know that everyone else around you understands what that symbolizes and sort of buys into it. And so that makes it a very easy thing to grab. So then when you're doing testing, I think this applies to kind of most things, by the way. I think when we're doing testing, we're testing how one person sees something. We don't yet have any of that effect of it being out in the world and people going, oh, I see other people liking that. Oh, maybe I do like it actually, and that totally does happen. Right. And so, so I think, it's, it doesn't, any kind of testing doesn't really allow for those effects that are such critical effects in what we do to kind of play out.
Yeah, and actually it's in all the steps before that, even the brand or the agency that are actually speaking to potential customers or actually living with them. I spoke to Johnny Cahill, who's the CMO of Heineken in USA for this podcast. And he, when he was in Russia, he was out living with miners, seeing how they live, to understand that, because you're understanding that, then you're able to kind of apply it to the brand and what you're trying to achieve. You know what I mean? So that's, if the work is done well to that point, maybe the testing just becomes a tick box exercise, that you just kind of, maybe the board need it.
Yeah. But I think as well, you could go into and live in that mining community and get a real sense for what are the things that culturally sort of the group kind of enjoy and like, and you get a sense for what could we do that not the consumer on their own is going to like, but that this kind of whole culture is going to come together around. And I think that's very difficult to link test. And again, you could go back and do your creative testing with one of those miners, and that person might say, "Oh, I'm not really sure about that," and it gets a red, and then you produce something that's far less effective. And so I think it's kind of like, it's Yeah, I could go on forever about the flaws in creative testing, but I do think, to go back to your point, which is about, if we spend enough time up front in culture and with consumers, we actually make, that leads us to make good choices, and that's absolutely true. And my first boss called that, he had a term for that, which was educating your intuition, which I thought was a lovely phrase. And he just, that was his counsel to me, was like, the more time you spend out there with people and in culture, just kind of like, not even necessarily like researching them, but just actually just hanging out with them and kind of observing them, the more your intuition gets educated. And because in advertising and in life, we have to make so many intuitive choices all of the time.
Yeah.
The more educated our intuition is, the more likely those choices are to be good ones. So, yeah, I think educating our intuition should be the primary, a primary kind of function of a marketing department or an agency. And beating leg tests should not be a primary function of marketing departments or ad agencies.
Right, writing them in my next round of commitments. Can we talk about the latest book, Future Demand?
Sure.
Okay, if you'd said no, that would have been terrible. So, this is aimed at kind of startups and newer businesses thinking about brand building, or the role brand building should have for them.
Yeah.
Why this book?
Well, I think so 9 years ago, I left the advertising industry and I started my own company, previously Unavailable, it's called. And we call ourselves an innovation studio because we work with innovative companies and innovators, helping them use kind of strategy and creativity to get the most out of their innovation. And that spans from helping them with innovation strategy in the early stages to new product development, through to new brand creation and development. And so within that mix, we work with lots of startup and scale-up companies. And what was interesting going out of advertising and into the world of startups and the venture capital community was that they were kind of as skeptical about brand and marketing as those clients were back in the ad world, were skeptical about creativity and creative awards. And so I kind of had the same realization that, okay, there's a group of people here who are skeptical about this, who believe that brand is actually just like, it's kind of a layer of bullshit that bad companies put over their crap products to like basically con people into buying them. That was really like largely the attitude of a lot of particularly kind of, tech companies and really kind of technical founders and very product led organizations, was that brand is just this this veil of like just lies and rubbish that you put around something so that people will buy it, even though it's not very good. And if we just made great products, right, we don't need
the product will sell itself.
So I'd show up and, hello, I'm James and I do brand stuff. And these companies will be like, oh, nice to meet you, but we don't actually need a liar to like bullshit about our stuff. Like we've actually made a good product to begin with. And so like people already like it. They don't need brand and marketing to make them like it. And so on one hand, you go, fuck, that's good. Like we've got a group of people who are actually striving to make useful, valuable, like decent things and put them into the world, not just churn out rubbish, which frankly, unfortunately, lots of large companies are quite guilty of turning out, pretty average products. And that's what creates space for all of the disruptors and the small companies to come in and do new and better things. So on one hand, I was like, this is awesome. We've got people that don't want to fill the world with rubbish. But I also have a belief alongside that, which is that brand is an amazing amplifier of a great product. It's not a replacement for it. It's an amplifier of it. And so that was very much my kind of going in position was, okay, I think, I believe that a company with a good product and a good brand is always going to do better than a company with a good product and a weak brand. So That was my going in position. Then working with them, that community over a number of years, what became really obvious was that one of the reasons that companies were a bit skeptical of brand and marketing, didn't want to spend money on it, was they all, if you start a new company and you do a good product, your growth in the early stages is usually really strong, right? So basically, if you're a good startup, you've solved a problem that exists for lots of people in the world, and you've been the first to solve it, or the first to solve it in the way that you're solving it, or whatever. And so there's naturally a whole group of people out there who have that problem and are willing to purchase a solution from it. They're just kind of waiting for someone like you to come along. And so if you put performance marketing in front of those people and say, we've got the solution to this problem you've always had, then lots of people click on that and lots of people buy it. So you get this early stage growth, which is really strong growth. And so it looks like we don't need to do like brand and marketing, all that kind of stuff. We've just created a great product and everyone wants it. The trouble is that group of people who have what I call pre-existing demand. So there's a group of people that have already had need for the product and they're ready to buy. That's a finite group of people. That's not everyone in the world. That's just a kind of a finite group of people that performance marketing is fantastic at going out and finding for you. So, but when you run out of that group, when you exhaust that group, it becomes much, much more difficult to find the next group of customers, right? So your cost of acquisition goes up,
everything goes
your
up.
Performance metrics suffer, and you suddenly, you're in this stage which, almost every single startup that we've worked with has faced at some point where they're like, wow, growth has slowed. It seems to be more difficult to find customers. What's going on? And so we sort of studied that, did a piece of work with Walk and got some sort of, all sorts of data from all over the place and sort of saw that pattern of sort of early stage growth and then that flattening out and plateauing, that was very, very common. We looked at what happened within that, and basically, what was happening was that these companies were very, very good at marketing to the people that are in the market and ready to buy today. But that's only a small group. Most people who buy from a category aren't ready to buy right now, but will come into that category at some point in the next, let's say, 2 years. And so what a great brand does is it builds up familiarity and sort of positive emotions towards a brand in the minds of people that will come into the category tomorrow, so that when they do come into the category, they gravitate toward our brand and they're more likely to buy it. And so what those startup brands don't tend to do very well at all is build their brands among those people who are going to come into the category in the future, and that's why they sort of hit that plateau. They've sort of exhausted all of their demand, and they haven't really introduced themselves or built up any kind of memorability or familiarity with the rest of the market that they now need as customers, but who are saying, well, I've never heard of you, and I'm not sure if I like you, and so don't know.
Yeah, and it. One of the things I thought when I was reading through the book is, I mean, all this is true, but I'm a new startup. I've got funding. I've got investors who are looking for my performance. Quarter on quarter, probably month on month. How are you performing? When I was reading the book, I couldn't help thinking, all the evidence is there. Brand building for the long term, but are investors and VC the problem in that they are demanding results quickly and quarterly?
Yes, although I don't think they're a problem in the sense that they don't listen to good advice, right? So I would say the VCs, like the startups, have sort of seen, lots of companies grow really fast in their early stages without much marketing or brand building, right? And so they're going off what they have seen. Also, the venture capital community there aren't a lot of people like me who sort of go between the venture capital world and the marketing and brand world. Like those two worlds are generally like they're pretty far apart, and so I think the venture capital community hasn't really had lots of people like me coming in and presenting the evidence to them and telling that story. So, I mean, I would say like we're very involved with the venture capital community here in New Zealand, and I mean, yeah, like since Future Demand, like they're all thinking about marketing and long-term brand building in a totally different way to how they were before, and they're becoming real advocates of brand. I mean,
Really?
the biggest, the two biggest by far VCs in this part of the world are now both total advocates for brand building, not for switching away entirely from driving short-term results, by the way, because it is about doing both of those things, absolutely. But they kind of understand that on a journey, they're going to invest in a company and then maybe 10 years later it's going to exit and provide them a return. And they want it to get all the way to that 10-year point, to that exit point. They don't want startups that start up, go off with a hiss and a roar for 2 years and then die. That's not optimal for a VC fund. And so they're really coming around to it. So yes, I'd say that they were a part of the problem for sure, but they have been amazingly welcoming of the evidence and the thinking and really get it.
Okay, it's great. They're smart people, right? So it's not, but it's probably, as you say, nobody was putting it in front of them in a way that was actually compelling, or just actually doing that, putting it in front of them and saying, look at this. Yeah.
I mean, as a marketing community, we're not very good at marketing, and brand does not have a very good brand. And so, part of my job as marketing is being a bit of a kind of a marketing science communicator, and building the brand of brand, and particularly like to people that are commercial, like they are, they're people that care about the hard stuff and are a bit suspicious of the soft stuff.
Yeah.
And what we've been terrible at doing is kind of explaining how brand relates to commercial stuff.
Yeah.
And so, so the community around us, and not just VCs, by the way, C-level executives and big corporates are kind of like, their understanding is like we use one kind of marketing to get these people as customers, and then we use this other kind of marketing just to kind of make them feel good about us. I don't really get that.
Yeah.
Whereas
let's spend more on the one that's tied to revenue. They're both.
Whereas the Future Demand mental model just makes it super clear that like there's one type of marketing to get the people that are in the market today to buy from you, and there's another type of marketing to get the people who will come into the category later to come to you at that point. So one is about driving your present growth, and one is about driving your future growth. Would you like to still be successful in 2 years' time? Most CFOs say, yes, please, I'd like that. And so, it's just providing, I think, the industry with a mental model that makes it easy for people who aren't marketers to kind of understand the value of the different things that we do.
Maybe we need a rebrand for brand, but that's a whole different thing. One of the things you talked about in the book, or like obviously a couple of things, but that I really liked was you talked about brand familiarity is better than price or product information. And I thought that was really great, because a lot of startups are like, we have a great product, tell everyone about the product.
Totally. Yeah. And tell all of the people who are ready to buy right now, tell them about the product. Absolutely. Because, I do this thing when I speak to audiences in the live real world. Not that you're not a real audience, by the way. You know what I mean? In real life, not on a podcast. When I'm in front of a group of people, I always do this thing where I say, okay, can you put up your hand if, like right now or in the last 2 weeks, you've been actively looking for a new mobile phone? You've been sort of upgrading your mobile phone. And say it's a group of 50 people, 3 people will put their hand up. And I'll say, okay, who put your hand up if you think that sometime in the next 2 years you will be actively looking for a new mobile phone? And then everyone puts their hands up. And that's a demonstration of like there's existing demand and there's future demand. The existing demand people, actually, if I put a kind of a chart comparing the Samsung Galaxy with the iPhone and going into all of its features and benefits and all of that stuff, like those 3 people would find that really interesting. They'd be like, okay, great. Like I'm in this, I need to make this choice right now. So this is really useful to have this information. Thank you. The other 47 people would just like bore the shit out of them. They don't care about any of that, right? And so that's the difference. Like for that group of people, all we've got to do, frankly, is make them a little bit more familiar with our brand, hopefully do something that they kind of makes them like us a little bit. So they just remember us, so that then in, September, when they come into the category, they go, oh, actually, I'm going to check out that brand because I remember I've got sort of just this residual positive memory of that brand. So I'll go and check out what they're doing. And so, yeah, it's just playing to the state that people are in. It's just kind of accepting that when people are in the market, they're not going to be triggered into buying your product if you give them loads of product information. That's just, you're just being annoying.
Yeah, so true. As it's in Paul Feldwick's book, and I can't remember who the quote is attributed to, but when TV advertising started, and it was like, TVs were in the middle of the room in the house, and it was, if you're invited into somebody's room, be a charming guest. And so that's that, right? It is. We still need to be a charming guest, and for people to like us and want us to come back again when they're actually ready to go and do that research and think more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You also talk and make the point in the book, which I think is actually really important that a lot of people forget. Brand building is not just advertising.
No, it certainly isn't. From a purist point of view, a brand is built by literally every single thing a company does. And so, the way that I think of brands, at their best, they're a sort of a simple idea at the heart of a business, which is, which really informs every decision it makes, from who it hires to how it treats those people to what it makes and how it makes it to, all of those things which come way before the advertising is ever made. And so a company can be, a company like, there are examples of companies that do this incredibly well. Like Patagonia's brand is like a little bit to do with the advertising and an awful lot to do with a lot of other choices that they make in their business. Right. Whereas the Coca-Cola brand is a lot to do with its advertising and sort of not that much to do with the other choices. And so it's horses for courses a little bit. But yeah, I think those brands that are really sort of exemplars of their point of view are the ones that are, the best brands. And the other thing that someone raised this point to me the other day, which was actually a really interesting one. They said, what's the role of brand building after a brand has suffered reputational damage? So down in this part of the world, in Australia, their national airline is called Qantas. Mm-hmm. Qantas has had a bit of a disastrous last couple of years in terms of dropping the ball on a lot of customer service and customer experience stuff in kind of like a way that is, that people really don't like. And at the same time kind of taking $2 billion in COVID support from the government and paying their executives massive bonuses and so it's a really bad look. Now, yeah. So they've suffered, and this has been sort of, documented. They've suffered a lot of reputational damage, a lot of damage to their brand, right? So their brand is much weaker now than it was before. Now, none of that damage has been done by advertising or marketing, right? It's nothing to do with that. So what that says is if you can do things which are nothing to do with advertising and marketing that can shrink a brand, right? That can damage it and make it worse, then that tells us that it's not just advertising and marketing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's really, I do think that's really critical for companies to understand. It's what we certainly try to bake into, all of the young companies that we work with. It's like, have this really strong point of view and don't just think of it as an advertising thing. Think of it as how are you going to orient everything that you do as an organization around this really strong kind of point of view. That's what your brand is. And you'll build it through marketing, but through everything else that you do.
Yeah. Cause everyone who works at a company, there's a brand that I really like in the UK called Butternut Box. And I think everything they do is about the brand, the customer service, their emails, like everything they're doing. And actually that's a really interesting brand because it does a lot of the things you talk about, like their price premium, like they're not cheap and they've had to put their prices up, but like they've retained their customers, but they do everything in like the tonality of it is wonderful. Like so many great things, but it's all about, you can see it every touch point they have. They're thinking about the brand. So Great. The last thing I did want to ask, or maybe two last things, but you've an example in the book, Stolen Rum, which I just thought was a wonderful example of bringing all of this kind of together. Can you just tell a little bit about their story and why that was such a good example?
Yeah, definitely. So Stolen, I mean, really interesting company. So it was the first time that I was involved with a startup. So back in 2010, the founders, Jamie and Roger, came back from overseas where they'd been an architect and a banker, and they came back home during the financial crisis, couldn't get jobs, loved rum, and wanted to start a rum company. And so they sort of started exploring doing that. And when I first met them, it was the two founders and a very good designer friend of mine here in New Zealand called Calvin So. And so Calvin and Jamie and Roger had a coffee with me, and it was just after they'd been told by their lawyers they couldn't call their rum company Sisters, which was the original name they were working on. And so the sort of the search began for a new name for this premium rum product. And I guess, what the challenge that we faced with rum in 2010 was that no one in New Zealand, or none of the kind of cool kids in New Zealand, liked rum. If you said, do you like rum? People would say, oh, no. It's the kind of thing that kind of like, people put in Coca-Cola and drink, as a really crappy booze drink. Or it's something they remember drinking as a teenager and then vomiting a lot afterwards because they had too much of it. So rum didn't have a very good brand, and so we were kind of like, okay, how are we going to, big challenge here is how we get people to come to the category really of spirit, as well as to the brand, and so we. We knew that if you said to people, do you like a mojito? They'd say yes. And we'd say, well, you do like rum. It's just that you like it when it's presented to you in a certain way. And that would kind of blow people away. And they'd be like, that's got rum in it. And anyway, so we had a clue that we had to sort of serve it in the right way. But then the way that we kind of branded it, I'd been doing a whole lot of reading about the history of rum. And the history of the spirit is that it's always been on the wrong side of the law. So it's slave trade and rum running in the Prohibition and pirates in the Caribbean and dodgy stuff in the Navy. And it's always like rum's always kind of been on the wrong side of the law, which I love because I kind of think that for lots of us, like our fondest memories are of doing things that we shouldn't really have done. Yeah. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that insight. And so anyway, well, we in the really early days of this company, when the guys were just kind of, they just made the liquid. Calvin was working on the bottle designs. We're just sort of really early stages. And so Calvin needs to take Sisters off the bottle design and put another word on the bottle. And he put Stolen as kind of like half just a placeholder, really. It's just like a similar shape to the word Sisters. And he puts that on the bottle, and I'm just like, that is so completely rum, right? That is such like a great name for a rum brand, because it respects and honors this amazing tradition of rum being on the wrong side of the law. So we all just fell in love with that name immediately, and that was the new name for Stolen. And that became the whole ethic of the company, was like, well, we're going to do things that you kind of shouldn't do. We're going to be provocative and disruptive, not for the sake of being so, but to honor the history and the heritage of this great spirit. And so that's why we did silly things like we stole other brands' taglines, like, just drink it, and drink different, and, all that kind of stuff. We did cool stuff like when we went to, we made this product for bartenders. It was an overproof rum, and you couldn't actually import it into Australia because there was this regulation that you're not allowed to import spirits of this alcohol quantity that have only been aged for this long. It's sort of one of these arcane things. Yeah. So instead what we did was we said to people, hey, can you you can take this rum in your carry-on on the plane, and you can take it to a bar and give it to the bar people. That's all completely legal. We just can't like officially import it and sell it. So we got all of these people to mule. They're called mules, and they muled the rum over to Australia and took it to a bar and gave it to a barman, and the barman would make them a drink and from it. And they would have this lovely experience, and the bartenders in Australia were introduced to the Stolen brand in a way that was very much about getting around the rules, right, and being on the wrong side of the rules. And so it sort of informed like all of the things that we did as a company, and made us like a really noisy and quickly quite iconic brand in this part of the world, and led to global expansion, and then getting acquired by a private equity company in Chicago. And so it was a really cool journey of being able to, create a brand, really bake that into the company and the product and sort of everything that we did. Take it to the States and get it kind of, get it eventually taken off our hands.
Stolen.
Yeah.
I know, I love that story. And it goes to show the power of the brand. And to your early point, it's not all about the advertising. It's, how it lives and, how it kind of behaves in the world. So we have gone way over time. You've been incredibly generous of your time, James. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. You are doing some work with WARC. I know you're doing, you're writing articles, but you're also doing, I don't know if a course is the right word for it, but you're doing a lot of work with them.
Yeah. So I've had a long and wonderful relationship with WARC and their sister company, Cannes Lions. The thing that we're doing this year is a program called the Master of Advertising Effectiveness. So it's a 6-week online course which teaches you as a marketer or advertising person all of the kind of the fundamental principles that we've heard come out of, WARC and the IPA and the Ehrenberg Bass Institute and all of these sort of great thinkers and researchers around the world studying this. And we've all heard all of the headlines, but, to actually learn all of that stuff in a way that allows us to put it all together and apply it to the work that we're doing. This is the program that really does that. So it really brings all of that thinking together in a way that makes it very sort of applicable. And so we actually started the program last year, ran 5 cohorts down here in New Zealand and Australia with a few kind of people from around the world. That went really well. People absolutely loved the program. And so then WARC were keen to partner with us on taking that further, taking that global. So we've done a complete re-platforming of the program. It looks amazing. It's a really lovely thing. And so it's made to be taken alongside your full-time job. So it's kind of like a couple of half-hour modules, video modules a week that you watch at your leisure, a live session with me once every couple of weeks. It's pretty easy to do, but it will make you a much better a much better planner of advertising, whether that's as a strategic planner or just as a marketer or an agency person who's involved in the planning and creation of advertising.
Yeah, well, I'm a huge fan of WARC. I think what they have and what they deliver is phenomenal, and I think then that combined what we just talked about here, right, is like scratching the surface of the knowledge I guess you're imparting in that course. So I think it certainly, yes, would encourage people to do that, and if they're not, this sounds like it's an ad for WARC, but if they're not to WARC, honestly, it's phenomenal. So listen, best of luck with that. Best of luck with
Thank you.
Your Future Demand book and all the other work that you have out in the world. And thanks, because I think what you're doing is actually really important. And, you taking the time that you have to invest in doing all that research and digging into the data and putting it together in a way that's consumable, understandable, shareable with, C-suite and investors is really important. And so thank you for that. Appreciate all that you do.
Thanks, man. That's really cool. Yeah. I mean, I just love doing it. So it's far from a chore, but yeah, it's wonderful to hear you say that. Thank you.
I knew James's work, but I didn't truly understand or know the full story behind how the case for creativity came about. Clearly now it is something we all talk about, and hopefully there is a widely held view that it is a key business driver. But when James started out on this work, he was digging deep to find the evidence, collect it, and see if there was a case to be made, and then using that evidence to help make great work. And now he's building on that work with future demand and helping not just companies he works with, but other startups that believe in brand building, and helping them by talking to VCs and boards about this. James talked today about planning with humility. And despite the incredible breadth and depth of work James has carried out, he is full of humility. He's building a belief system that is very important for our industry, and it was a real pleasure to speak with him today. If you want to find out more from James, you can of course buy his books, but also check out his Masters of Advertising Effectiveness, www.mae.academy. And he has done a ton of great work with WARC also, so definitely worth checking that out. So that is it for this episode. Thanks for listening to That's What I Call Marketing. If you did enjoy it, please do share and add comments with your feedback. You can get in touch and find all previous episodes on that'swhaticallmarketing.com. Follow us on Instagram on That's What I Call Marketing, on Twitter at @that's_marketing. And now you can actually watch our episodes back on YouTube. And yes, you guessed it, you'll find us on That's What I Call Marketing on YouTube. So from me, Conor Byrne, until the next episode, thanks for listening or watching, and take care.